All right, so welcome to the weekly coaching call with yours truly, Omar Pinto. Today we're going to do something a little bit different because we've got a small group, and each person in this group has recently been coached. So let's see how everyone's doing. So I'd love to start out with Patrick and get a little feedback on, it was a very, very heavy session last week. And I'm curious as to what has come up since we met.
Well, I also had homework from coaching session as well. So I guess everything's come up as far as like all the feelings. I've stopped. So from that session, it was interesting, had a discussion with my wife and we talked about wanting to spend more time with each other. And we kind of left that as like, I told you like, hey, the session was great. We're going to end up booking for Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
This was one of the first ones was said because, we're coming up on 70 years and she's like, yep, let's do it. And I'm like, all right, Hawaii, who's going to argue with that? And then we sat down, made space to book it and talk about it. And everything went not according to plan. And it was like the hero's journey. Like every test that I've, that you've very explicit tests that you've kind of put me through in coaching, all the tools that I've had from there, they kind of arose, so we talked about Hawaii and then it became like a debate on which island, and it was expensive. So, okay, well, let's take a look at options in Mexico to do an all-inclusive because I don't want to worry about stuff, well, that's what she said. So, and, you get more for the money and you just pay up. And I'm like, okay, so that means passports. And she's like, oh, yeah, well, it's backed up. So now we need to make this whole long list of like, we have to do the passports. And if we're doing it now, but we're not taking the kids, do we get their passports? And it became like, and I got very frustrated with it. And I was like, I just wanted it to go. I was like, how do you not want to go to Hawaii at this point? And it became this, and I was very frustrated, and she's like, I want this all inclusive thing. And I realized that like, I hadn't vocalized what I had thought personally into the situation as far as like my feelings. I was thinking like something more of like a low tech cottage space, like I want to break from everything, right? She wants the spa retreat. And I quickly realized I said Hawaii, but we had very different Hawaii vacations in mind, right? Very, very different. And it was at some point, when we were getting stuck on talking like, well, we need our passports and everything, I had to get up and leave the conversation because I was just like very frustrated. And I'm like, I could feel all the things shutting down. And she's like, why, it's like, I was getting frustrated. I was like, why is this even a deal? I'm trying to do this for us. Why don't you listen? Type of thing. Luckily I didn't say that. So I went and did some dishes and kind of took my deep breaths and realized that I wasn't vocalizing my needs, wants, and desires out of that. And she's like, why? I didn't know that you wanted a low tech. And I was like, to be honest, I didn't either. And I needed to talk it through, and I thanked her for letting me kind of go through that. And I wasn't trying to hang anything up on that. And then she was like, well, she vocalized, a desire to bring the kids along, to feel inclusive. And I was like, I feel like we need to work on us. And so if we did Hawaii, then we wouldn't have money for other trips, right? So she felt like we were taking away something. So we talked and, we felt like a need to not do something so burdensome with passports and the need to get there. And, I was like, well, is there a place that, might intersect all that? Like, was affordable, reachable, and long story short, we ended up booking for Sanibel Island, and because it gave us more days to work on us. She has fond memories of that, as a child. So, but it was, and we found a Airbnb where it was like right off the beach, so we could still do the walks, but she said all of her shopping areas and everything like that. So it was that process of, some people refer to the creativity process, but it was basically both of us having to vocalize that all out there. And, it was every trick in the bag was used, it felt like. And I stopped trying to get, feeling frustrated was fine. And that was like the signal for me, like, hey, take a deep breath. Let's see what's going on here. And then, also talking through stuff and not worrying about, like, if I say, let's go on the vacation and not worry about the kids, there'd been some part of me in the past I would have held back because I'd be like, am I being a bad dad because of that? Am I being, so it was interesting. And even when we were going through the booking process, I found insight too, because I was like, okay, so here are the Airbnbs. Here's what we're looking at. And she's like, well, I think we can I think there's another big deal. And, like, what if I miss a deal? And I'm like, yeah, what if? It's like, we could just book right now. And she's like, well, it needs to be perfect. And so I said, what does perfect look like? And she was like, well, I don't know. And I go, for me, it's spending time with you, where we're close to the beach on the vacation, just being able to spend time with each other, where we're not hindered by an itinerary or feeling guilty from cost. And like, so it wasn't really the destination that I was worried about. It was, all the other items, and vocalize that. And and we booked it, and it was like in September-ish. And she's like, well, that's at the height of the hurricane season. And I'm like, yeah, and that's what insurance is for, right? We have ways out of it. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, right? But we can book somewhere else. We can't worry about all the unknowns that we don't know about.
So you guys actually booked. So success.
Yeah, it was the longest path to success of something that I was not expecting by any means.
So I could go in so many directions just with this story. And that's what's so beautiful about coaching and about understanding human nature, is that as I'm listening to you talk, right, so many things start coming up. But ultimately, when you think about the outcome, when you sit down to, make your plans to go to Hawaii, for example. So here's my objective. My objective is, we're planning a trip to Hawaii. And then you guys ended up booking someplace else. So a lot of times this is a great life lesson, because even though we had an objective to get to this, whatever it is, this particular outcome, if this outcome doesn't come, could another potential outcome come up, right? And what's more important, the outcome or the learning curve and the learning process that happened between you and your wife? Is kind of like this realization. I was like, wow, I don't know how to express my needs, wants, and desires to my wife. And in the past, I would have felt guilty because I don't want to bring my children. And so I start to feel guilty that I'm being a bad father. And that's the dialogue. That's the internal dialogue, the inner critic that is just, incessantly chattering the whole time you're sitting next to your wife. So while you guys are trying to make this plan, she's got her chatterbox going on in her head. You've got yours going on, and her chatterbox is, it's got to be perfect. It's got to be perfect, right? And then as soon as you ask the question, well, what does perfect look like to you? I don't know. Usually when somebody says, I don't know, you're going in the right direction. Because at the end of the day, your idea of perfect and her idea of perfect are very different things. And I know as soon as you said that, I said, you know, well, my idea of perfect is just time that you and I can spend away from all of what's familiar, all the chaos that's currently in our life, you know, some time to spend away from the children so you and I can focus on our marriage. I can't imagine that not being the right response, because ultimately that's the objective. And a lot of times now, moving forward, one of the first questions you could ask when planning a trip are, okay, what is your idea, or what is the intention of this trip for you, honey? Let me tell you what my intention for this trip is. My intention for this trip is for us to rekindle our marriage, reconnect as a couple, right? And find each other again. So Hawaii is obviously a beautiful set and setting where we can fulfill this intention, but we can also fulfill that intention in a lot of different places. Ultimately, it's just a space to get away from it all so that you and I can re-engage. And so that immediately starts off where ideas could come from that intention on your wife's side. Oh, that's the objective? Oh, okay. I thought it was a family trip. I thought you wanted to like take the kids to Hawaii so they, you know, so we could take lots of pictures and they can remember Hawaii and they have fond memories of Hawaii. Two very different objectives, two very different visions for the same objective. And so this is a great learning experience, because the fact that you didn't quit, you didn't give up, you saw it through. Ultimately, what happened was, it wasn't the trip that was the most important thing. It was you expressing what it is the intention with the trip was for.
Agreed. I've had many other breakthroughs this week, and I don't know if I need to get into them, but like just being able to articulate and express those needs when I'm feeling frustrated. And I saw some real insight. Like I feel like I had a lot of breakthrough on the inside of my sobriety. You know, like I felt like I had this hanging out, am I a dry drunk hanging over me? And I quickly realized that for me, Omar, that that chatter, that, you know, inability to express my needs, wants, and desires, you know, like that was easily my coping mechanism for that. That was my quick place, you know, that I called it the glove that's easily slip into, right? You know, she didn't hear me, so all right, it's been a long day. And then so for like, that is just one more of those items that feels relieved, you know, like I can just, you know, see it for what it is at this point, and that's very helpful. So
Tell me a little bit about where the anger's at.
right now, so I had to do some insight on when I was so upset, and it came from that statement of there's some form of simplicity that eludes you, and I was so perturbed by that. And I realized part of my anger with that is mixed up in, you know, a couple other things. One is me seeking approval, and then obviously as a coach, you know, I wanted to be at the later sessions to be, oh, you know, you've done all your sessions, you're good to go, you made it, everything's going to be okay. In reality, I know you can't do that, but you know, there was some part of me that needed, you know, here's your, I was still looking for that gold star or that certificate of achievement, right? And I was upset because nothing could have been further from the truth. Like out of all the things that we've ever said in our conversations, when you say some form of simplicity eludes you, that made me like upset, because like I try and work on that so hard, and I'm like, he's not seeing it, I'm not being recognized, you know. It's like, but why do I need that validation from him? And you know, that's was kind of the upsetting part. And I realized I really enjoyed finding myself, finding my space from, you help hold that in our coaching sessions. So part of that is too, like, the realization, like, at some point those will come to an end, and, that sense of loss was very, it took me a while to find where, trying to understand, is just a straight sense of loss at some point that I'm going to have to deal with on that, and just going through those emotions. It was very, I'm angry that, I haven't found either alternative or more spaces, or they're not as strong yet, where I can feel 100% vulnerable. Uh, And it made me realize, like, hey, but you've been doing awesome work with, your wife and at work, and even with your kids. And it's not, like, or maybe there's opportunity to find a mentor or mentoring group, or, continue to show up here and other recovery sessions, like, why are you so worried about having to have that a perfect space for you to just, like, because there's something rewarding, like, we're only 15 minutes in, and you get straight to it. You don't deal with the bullshit, right? And when I'm doing this with, like, other people or whatever, it's icky and messy and, like, drawn out and abrasive, and, like, there's other feelings mixed in there too, for sure, that's hard to, like, sift through. So, I guess that's my frustration of, like, I feel like you know how to get to your emotions. You done it. You did it that one time. You should be a master at it by now.
It's practice, Patrick. And and what a beautiful display of vulnerability, because ultimately it's that there's sadness. What it is grief and sadness, right? Losing or potentially losing something that is very valuable, something that you have grown attached to. And I mean, Dalai Lama, the Buddha. At the root of all suffering is attachment. So we attach ourselves to our spouse, we attach ourselves to our children, we attach ourselves to an identity, we attach ourselves to people that make us feel safe and make us feel comfortable. And the thought of losing that will sometimes provoke further chaos and further dysfunction in order to continue staying attached. And ultimately, what we have to do is we have to recognize that there's things that no matter what happens, they're always going to be a part of our lives. And that I can always go to this person, or I can always go to this space. I can count on this space. I can count on this person. And there's other people that you come to realize, I no longer feel comfortable in this space. I no longer feel comfortable confiding or being vulnerable in this space. And that's the beautiful thing of starting to flow, coming into flow state, coming into non-attachment, because and going into breath. Comes in, comes out, comes in, comes out. Things come in, people come into our lives, people leave our lives. People come into our lives, people leaves our lives. Certain people come in and they stay. Right? There's no reason why there's certain people that can't, that as far as, like, for, even my clients, right? I've got clients now that for years, and they'll email me and, like, okay, dude, I need a one-off. I need a session. Okay. Because they've already gotten the main part of the work done. And so they just need, a quick, a tweak. But, my tweaks always come with, a hard hit in the face, right? Because we don't have time to waste. We're not going to draw this thing out. Tell me what's going on. Okay, great. Now I have an idea of what's happening. Tell me the feelings associated with it. Okay, great. Now, what does this remind you of? What is being brought up? What is being triggered? There are no failures. There are no mistakes in this life. There are just lessons. And as long as I continue to look at my obstacles as failures or disappointments or setbacks, instead of, oh, I've just been presented with a lesson. You learned something when you sat down with your wife and figured out what was the intention for this trip. And so I'm sure now you guys now on the same page?
Yeah, most of the page. I'm not going to say all 100% of it, but enough that we're seeing eye to eye on many topics and themes about that, but also recognizing that each other's coming from a different space on it. So, and that's the fun part of a relationship with somebody that you spend a long time with, right? There's always something new to find out in those little nuances. So, yeah.
A big takeaway when it comes to planning vacations or buying a car or buying a home or moving to a new city or whatever the case may be, as a couple, when you're making decisions, the biggest fear for both of you is that the other person is not happy. A lot of times we think, I'm not getting what I want, I'm not getting what I need. But in most cases, if my wife is not happy, if we go, I'll give you an example. If we go out to breakfast and she orders something and it doesn't come the way she wanted it to, I'm the one freaking out, not her. Oh, she didn't order it like that. Oh, she's not going to like it. I know she's not going to like it. And I will jump, right? No, that's not right. And she'll say, no, it's fine. Leave it alone. I'll eat it, right? And then I'll watch her kind of dance around it. And it literally eats at my soul because I take so much responsibility for her happiness. If she's not happy, I feel like I failed her somehow. Like I failed her. I let her down. I disappointed her. And so subconsciously, that's something that many of us do not recognize. It's in those moments where our partner is frustrated or upset or not happy. If we go on a trip that I chose, that I planned, that I took, I made all the decisions, and they're not happy, I failed. And vice versa. That's really what it all boils down to. When I'm unable to effectively communicate my intentions and my purpose of what the intention is for this trip or for this car or for this move or for this house or for this breakfast, whatever the case may be, then I will ultimately end up feeling like I let them down or I failed them if they're not happy. And it could be my kids, buddy, when it comes to my daughter, if she's not happy, like there is a part of me inside that has to remind myself, it's not your responsibility. This is not your responsibility to make her happy. She has to find her own happiness. It is so difficult to not take things personally, but this is the work, Patrick. This is the journey. The journey is constant, and it's a constant practice of detachment, a constant practice of detachment. I cannot attach myself to the outcome. We've gone over this. Okay. When I attach myself to an outcome, I'm basically guaranteeing myself disappointment. If I'm focusing on the experience, if I'm focusing on the journey, I can't go wrong. Because no matter what happens, I'm going to learn from it. Oh, well, the trip didn't go exactly as planned, but we're going to do this differently next time. And then this idea of I failed her doesn't come up. And most of the time, it's so buried subconsciously that what comes out is rage and anger. I planned this trip for you. You're so ungrateful. I can't believe, you would say this and that. And it's not about you being angry at them. All that anger and rage that's going outwards is really all going inwards. All right. So I haven't heard from you, Ted. Give us a little feedback on I know you can relate to this.
Well, I know that what just recently popped in my mind is in an SRC meeting with Barbara, we discussed the 4 agreements. And the second agreement is don't take anything personally, not even what you say to yourself.
Absolutely.
I think there's a lot to that. And I had never known anything about that philosophy, that book at all, until I joined the group. And I am just so glad that I know about it. I mean, let's see here. I've been married for about 44 years. No, I've been married for more than 44 years. And if there's one thing I've learned for my wife to make her own decisions. And whatever decisions she makes, she lives with. It didn't take me too long, just 44 years to figure that out. So I don't know how much time you have left, but it'll come to you. Just thinking of outcomes and objectives. Actually, I'm going on a vacation starting Saturday. I'll be gone for 5 days. And my wife and I are going camping in what we call up north in Michigan. We're going camping up north. We're going to the Wilderness State Park, which is very close to a dark sky park where we can do some star observation. And we know that we may run into some instances. And that's okay. I'm not making any plans at all. Whatever happens when we get up there, we'll make up our minds from there. If we can walk in the woods, that's fine. If we can't for some reason or another, we'll figure out something or another. We have never been camping more than 3 days because we're pretty much alike. After 3 days, you just need to be in a motel and take a shower, And this time we're going for 5 days, so this will be an experience. But I'm finding out that the process of doing things isn't quite as important as, well, it's not how things end, it's the process. It is the process. That's what really means something. I very rarely talk to my wife about plans for vacation because she does that all. And and she usually works things out fairly well. And if she doesn't, well, I'm not going to feel bad about it because I didn't make any of the plans. Maybe when we started out in our marriage, I thought I saw things a little bit different, but after 44 years, I am not going to suffer over anything that she makes a decision about. I've been there, done that. What's next is what they say. I've been to Hawaii a couple of times. I thought it was great. My wife and I think it's wonderful, but it's not the only place to go. Camping up north will be just fine. And no matter how it works out, it'll be just fine. The whole idea is to do something a little bit different. I'm sure that we'll relate to each other in a different way than we do when we're home. Thank God. This camping trip is going to take me to the end of the month. And beginning in August, I'm going to be taking somewhat of a different tact in my recovery program. And I have no idea how it's going to turn out. I have no expectations of it except that I know that I'm going to do it. And whatever I take out of it is what I take out of it. I've numbered a number of points in my personal recovery program that I have in front of me right here. And one of them is number 4. I will be accountable for my addiction recovery as I am for all my other actions. That's the main thing for me right now. This is different. I've never tried a program like this before. Another one is point 6. What's point 6? I will make use of as many offerings from the sobriety engine as I can. and and I guess I'm doing that too. SRC has something to do with it. I don't know. Another one is point 7. I will keep in contact with people I feel are important. And number 9 is I will not waste my time with any unproductive group, ideologies, people, or ideas. Accomplishing worthwhile actions is important, and I will find worthwhile projects. This is going to help me. I know it. I know it's going to help me one way or another, and I can't predict how exactly it's going to help me. But I do know that I can't change anybody else's mind. I can't do it. I've learned a lesson from you, Omar, in that you can take the most way out situation. You can take the most mundane situation. And when you talk about it, it sounds perfectly right. It's all a matter of perspective now, isn't it?
Yes.
Sometimes I feel like, oh man, this person is a space cadet. But one thing I know about myself is I always tend to judge people first, and then I find out what they're all about, and I'm always wrong. My first impression is always wrong. So as long as I know that, and as long as I keep that in mind, I think I'll do okay.
That point 9 is very important, Ted. Okay. Ultimately, there's so many people that use drugs and alcohol or whatever type of coping mechanism that they use because they're forced into a community that is not right for them. So when we think about just the general sense of dogma, of being born into a culture, born into a religion, born into an ideology, we as human beings are born with free will. We have a consciousness for a reason. It gives us the ability to feel, to experience, to learn, to grow, to evolve, to expand. And when that is stifled, then we will self-sabotage. We will do things to ourselves and to others as a way of retaliation. At the time, it doesn't feel like it. You don't recognize it. But as a human being, we are born with free will and the right to make any decision we want. Okay. I could get up right now from this call, go to the liquor store, pick up a bottle of booze and slam it. Okay. There's nothing preventing me from doing that except choice. That's it. There's nothing preventing me from harming myself or others except for choice. And when choice is removed from us in one way or another, we will retaliate. We will have a burst of anger. We will insult people, or we will go out and drink over it. So ultimately, it's super important to find a group of individuals that have a common goal, a common language, a common shared values. That's it. And ultimately, what it boils down to, when I talk about when people are when there's marriage issues, then I will usually go into the direction of values. Because quickly, if you and your spouse do not have shared values, this is where the crumbling of the relationship and the marriage really stems from. Okay. When people meet, usually they get married, it's because they have shared values. But if you've been together for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 44 years, there could be a moment where one starts to grow in this direction and the other one starts to grow in that direction, and values change. And as soon as values change, conflict ensues. And so ultimately what happens is it boils down to how effectively you are able to communicate your new values and try and understand theirs and see where the common ground is. And that's about adulting. That's ultimately about adulting. But so many of us, that's not what we're taught. We're taught to feel a certain way, act a certain way, do a certain thing, wear a certain thing, believe a certain thing. We were stripped from our identity from birth. And then when I try to express myself as an individual, I don't know how. And instead I throw a tantrum. And so this is what it ultimately boils down to. Do the people that I currently spend time with, who I am currently associated with, Patrick alluded to that earlier, shared values is really what we're talking about. You know, am I going to find a place? Am I going to find people where I can share openly and vulnerably the way that I have been recently? Because this feels good. I want this to continue. What's coming up, Ted?
Well, I don't think that my marriage is perfect. Don't get me wrong with that. There was one point in time where we actually saw a counselor, and the counselor put us through this, what I consider to be a game that I was very bad at. The idea is my wife would tell me something, and then I would say what I just heard. And what I just heard had nothing to do with what she told me, And communication is it's tough, especially between, well, I think anyway, between a man and a woman, because we just think differently. One's from Venus, one's from Mars, I understand. Communication, my wife and I have found that as soon as I stop communicating, that's where the trouble begins. As far as going different ways, boy, I really see that happening, because I've never conducted a recovery program like I'm conducting a recovery program now. I honestly feel that I'm turning a corner. And if Madeline, my wife, doesn't turn with me, there might be that conflict. But as long as we keep up what we're doing, why we're doing it, if we communicate, we'll be okay. As far as like where you're going for vacation, frankly, that doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot. It's how you're doing it that means everything. It doesn't make any difference if you go to Hawaii or if you go to Sanibel Island.
Beautiful.
It really doesn't make any difference. It's how you get there. And I think that's what Patrick was telling us all, is that he was thinking about the idea of how he's getting somewhere. Now, I certainly don't like to speak for other people, so I'll stop right there. But I know for myself, it's always the process rather than an objective or an outcome.
What is a trip? What is a vacation? It is a journey, if nothing else. And from the moment, you start planning, you start to build that anticipation, that excitement for the trip. So part of the whole journey is actually sitting down and planning where you're going to go and where you're going to stay and what you're going to eat and what activities you're going to do. And that kind of sets, the dopamine. It starts the dopamine going, right? Like I have something to look forward to. The trip's in September. Every week from now on, the only thing Patrick's going to be thinking about is, ooh, in September, we're going on vacation, right? And so what happens is every week you get an opportunity to release some dopamine. Every time you think about this upcoming trip, you've already created this fantastic, very healthy way of releasing dopamine in your life, is by just thinking about this upcoming trip. And this is what happens to a lot of people too. They have this trip that's coming, and so the dopamine's getting released and they're so excited about the trip. And then the trip comes and like, it's not as great as I thought it was going to be. We fought her the whole time and I didn't like the chips, the fish and chips at the restaurant that they said it was supposed to be the best fish and chips ever. Shit, And so I set myself up. It's always and always about the journey. So as soon as I get to now, we're packing. It's a new sense of excitement. Oh my God, packing. Oh my God, we're getting closer and closer. This is fantastic. What are we going to take? Don't forget this. Okay, great. Right. Oh my God. Okay. Get all the passports ready. Unless there's no passports. Right. And, get the car ready or get ready for the flight. And then you're at the airport. And my wife and I always get there 3 hours early to the airport because we like to sit in the VIP lounge. Right. So I hate being stressed. I hate being pressured. Right. And so we can sit in the VIP lounge. So that's actually part of the whole, like, ooh, I can't wait. I love sitting in that VIP lounge. Right. And there's all this free food in there. And, it's all part of every single facet of the trip is the trip. There is no outcome. There's no fucking check they're going to write you in the end. Okay, you're not going to get a trophy. There's no outcome. There is every facet of the trip, getting to the hotel, checking into the room, setting up your clothes, getting ready for the next day. Every single moment is about being in that moment.
Are you telling Patrick not to expect a gold star?
Yes.
You know, I've got to admit, I was just thinking of something when you were talking about planning the vacation. Just today, I asked my wife, so when are we leaving Saturday? And of course, her answer, you know, after 44 years, you know what buttons to push, you know, right? And so her answer is, I told you so many times before. I told you 2 days ago when we were going to leave. And I stupid me, I butt in and I go, I didn't ask you how many times you told me before. I didn't ask you that question. I asked you, when are we leaving Saturday? You know, the process can be a real trip, I'll tell you. The trip ain't no trip, but boy, the process can be a real trip.
The process is everything. If I focus on being present, that's the gift. That's the vacation. It's all about being present, not being on the phone, not worrying about the selfie, not worrying about anything. If this, you know, you're going to do it anyway, right? It's just about enjoyment. We have forgotten how to enjoy things. And if that should be the objective. Are we enjoying ourselves? And if I'm enjoying myself, chances are my spouse is enjoying herself. You know, so Tori, we haven't heard from you. What's your feedback on all this?
Well, I actually was in Hawaii last month, and then a couple weeks ago I did go camping up in the mountains. So you know,
Wow.
When I went to Hawaii, it was with my mom, and it was. But the other times I've been to Hawaii, I stayed at nice places and resorts and all that stuff. And this time was the first time that we went without my dad because he passed away. And we don't have the means to stay in those resorts anymore, And so we stayed at, just like a little Airbnb, and it was great. But I think there was, that with my mom, that disappointment of not living in, the lush lifestyle anymore. But and I usually just fly by the seat of my pants, so I could care either way. But it wasn't perfect, right? And it wasn't like how that she expected it, and it wasn't how I expected it either because of just the dynamic. But I do agree, like I love that it's about the journey and not the destination, because even just planning it with her, and my mom's not great at making decisions for herself, so it was really cool to kind of push her a little bit more than usual and watch that happen. And we got into 10 days with my mom. Hello. Like, of course we got into it a couple times, but, overall it was great. And, for me, I just try not to have expectations anymore, because that usually with anybody in my life gets me into a dangerous position for me to create resentment and then ultimately then I beat myself up, and I just don't like that feeling.
And you beat yourself up because
I'm a perfectionist. Yeah.
And why are you a perfectionist?
Where are we going?
No, it's going to loop back to what we started with.
Yeah. Why am I a perfectionist? Because I want to feel good about what I'm doing and please others. And
Because
I don't know,
if your mom's not happy,
then I'm not happy.
that was the loop.
Yeah.
That was it, right? Like as you were talking, I immediately hold on.
I did it. It's
You
good.
know,
Yeah.
I was looping back to the beginning of the conversation, which is for every single one of us, whoever we're traveling with, that need for perfection is not for us. If they're happy, we're happy. If they're not happy, we failed. And so ultimately, what we're trying to avoid is this feeling of failing and disappointing the people that we love the most. Right. So, and I love this too. This one can be titled Managing Expectations, Tori, because really that's what we've been talking about this whole time is managing these expectations. Okay. When we go into situations with people that we care about and love, whether it's our children, whether it's our spouse, whether it's people we work with, whether it's our family members, whether it's our parents, when this idea of when the perfectionism comes up, it's really about managing expectations. Right. I have some expectations, whether they are conscious or subconscious. And when things don't go the way that I expected them to go, I get triggered. Right. And so I'll just tell you guys real quick how my wife and I do it. Right. So when we got married, we went to Paris. Now, my wife and I, when we met, okay, 42 years old, okay, both have careers, both are successful, both on our feet. So, also I'm on another level when it comes to vulnerability and being open and discussing my feelings. And right. So it's like, it was it was a very dynamic and very intense relationship right from the beginning because, we were both very open, sharing with each other about life experiences, right? There wasn't really any holding back. And so 3 months after I met her, I asked her to marry me. 3 months. And she said yes. And before our first year anniversary, we were already married. Right. And so there was this very effortless sort of relationship until we went on our honeymoon and we actually traveled, and we'd actually never really traveled somewhere. So this was a big trip. We went to Paris. And so she had all these expectations because she'd been to Paris and she wanted to show me Paris. And I'm like, this is not as big a deal as I thought it was going to be. And, oh, look at this. We're at the Eiffel Tower. And I'm like, God, this line is long. There's so many people here. And there was this kind of like chain of events that ended up by the end of the trip. We're sitting on the plane and she says, thank God we got married before we went on our honeymoon, because if we had gone on this trip before, I would never have married you. Of course, she was being a little dramatic, right? But ultimately, it was nasty. Okay. Now, there was a lot of learning and growing that needed to happen. Here's the thing. My wife loves to travel. Not only does she love to travel, she loves to plan. So I'm the kind of person that likes to delegate, right, Tori? I don't like to do the work, the admin work. Okay. I am the talent. Okay. I'm the entertainment. I show up, I deliver. It's my job. Okay. And so I had to learn that about my own marriage. So my wife's not the entertainer. She's not the one that delivers, but she's the producer. She loves to execute. So it's like, okay, we're going to go here. And she goes online and she's looking at Airbnbs and she's looking at hotels. And then she starts looking at the best restaurants in this city. Okay, we're going to go here and we're going to go there. My only job is to go, honey, that's amazing. That looks wonderful. Oh my God, I can't wait to go there. And then we get there and it's like, this is the best place ever. Oh my God, this is the best meal ever, right? So I know exactly what my role is. And once you identify who you are, what your talents and gifts are, what you bring to the table, right? Ultimately, everything that she does, she pours her heart and soul into it. So when I receive it, I deliver heart and soul back to her. Okay. I let her make the choices, make the decisions. And then I go, this is, and I enjoy, like I go next level enjoyment. And by the end of this trip, there's so many magic moments that have happened. There is no one thing about the trip that was the most important. It was, what a great trip, right? Oh God, this tastes just like, remember when we went to this place and we had the steak and this, oh my God, yes, it was so good. It was amazing. Life becomes about experiencing in the moment, having these wonderful memories about what happened when we went on this trip and how that correlates with what we're experiencing right now. And we slip into our roles effortlessly now. But what did it take? It took almost getting an annulment after our honeymoon, right? To sit down and communicate effectively about, okay, what was your intention? Like, what did you want me to experience on this? What was the deal here? And there was all of this kind of like learning process. But after a while, right, and you get to know your spouse, you understand what their motivation is and what their intentions are. You roll, and then it just becomes another effortless facet of your relationship, but it doesn't come off the bat. There is going to be failures and mistakes and disappointments and letdowns. And as long as you don't give up, then what you learn from it is going to deliver on the next trip. It's going to deliver on the next whatever that you guys choose to do together. Because at this point now, you know exactly how to communicate moving forward. That's what's going on with Patrick at the moment, right? That's what's been happening with Ted. Since he started joining these calls. How do I communicate more effectively with my wife? How do I communicate effectively with my daughter? Right. And that's really what it all boils down to. So, Pat, any final thoughts before we shut her down?
Of course, your epiphanies just smack me right in the face sometimes. So the one that came across was when you said, being an adult is effectively communicating your wants, needs, and desires. That's adulting. And I was like, holy shit, I've been going through all the way up going like, I don't feel like an adult. I don't feel like an adult. I don't feel like an adult right now. And you said that and I was like, yeah, what Omar said is being an adult. And it's been fun, exactly what you said with, your wife. Now that the thaw is happening, letting go of the guilt, you're not walking down the hallway like, in a quick draw scenario or anything like that, that tenseness, that, just overhanging guilt from each of us, as that begins to go away, it becomes more effortless and I get to see her. So, I appreciate all the insights as usual.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Ted, any last thoughts?
Yeah, towards the end, I made 3 notes in my little planner here. The first one is to be more explicit. Second one is verbally explore situations a little bit better than I do and deliver a message. And I think that's my big takeaway.
Beautiful. I love it. All right. Tori?
Yeah, just for me, setting my expectations and not making them, not keeping high expectations and checking my own self.
Yeah, no. Managing expectations, I like what Ted had said, the outcome, my wife, whatever outcome or whatever feelings happen with my wife, it's not my responsibility. Okay. It's her responsibility, how she feels about anything. Right? And ultimately, it is every person's own responsibility to manage their own expectations and their own feelings associated with whatever decision they make. Right? You can either make the best of something or you can make the worst of it. It's always your choice as an individual. And that is how we'll close. All right. This was very cool, right? It ends up working out. All right, everyone. We'll see you next week. Have an amazing week. We'll talk soon. Lots of love.